Okay, so the epistolary novel as a sort of counterpoint to the picaresque novel. It also began in Spain in the 15th century, and it spread through France, and it arrived in England in the 17th century, and a woman called Aphra Behn wrote something called Love Letters Between a Nobleman and His Sister. Fascinating book, but not inside our period for this course. I talked about it last term if you were in the class last term. And it's very open. She talks very frankly about sexuality and taboo themes, incest and adultery. You'll notice that you know, in the picaresque novel as well, Tom Jones is thought to have slept with his own mother. Moll Flanders actually sleeps with her own brother. That seems to be another topic that's very popular in the 18th century, incest, adultery, those kinds of things. The point about the epistolary novel is integrating the letters into the plot, using letters that get lost, letters that don't get sent, letters that arrive, are delivered to the wrong person or fall into the wrong hands, or they get destroyed and so on. So the letters actually drive the plot in quite complicated and interesting ways. And that's happening in Behn's novel. It also happens in other epistolary novels. I'd like to talk about some of the thematic, rather than the structural plot devices, the themes that the epistolary novel focuses on. Firstly, it's a very good form for showing detailed expression of feelings. People are writing letters. In letters, people say what they think and what they feel. It's very often satirical. There's a kind of irony going on through the process of the letters and the action that's developing through those letters. Lots of love and romance. It's a typical vehicle for love and romance. So very often the central character, the protagonist, is female. You can see that in Behn's work and in other epistolary novels, lots of which have eponymous female heroines. We've got Samuel Richardson's Pamela and Henry Fielding's Shamala. Henry Fielding, of course, the author of Tom Jones. We've got Clarissa, another of Richardson's novels. We've got The History of Emily Montagu by Francis Brooke. We've got Fanny Burney's Evelina, which is the one that I'm going to focus on today. And Jane Austen in 1794 wrote Lady Susan, but it wasn't published until much later on. For some reason, it wasn't published in her lifetime. Anonymity is something to notice in women's writing. Aphra Behn published her love letters anonymously. She didn't put her name to it. And Fanny Burney equally chose to be anonymous when she published her work. And this was typical in the writing of the 18th and 19th centuries. Women very often did not put their name to their work. Partly because it wasn't considered suitable for women to be writers. So the family might not be happy. So they keep the name secret so as not to make it public that they were publishing. And the other thing is that they felt very often, and this continued into the Victorian period, that they wouldn't be taken seriously. If they want to be taken seriously, they have to pretend that to be men, that the author is a man. So the readers, if they think that it's written by a woman, they won't take the work so seriously. And so Fanny Burney did the same thing with Evelina, but unfortunately, a man, George Huddesford, published a poem showing that Fanny Burney was the author. She was very angry with him. He outed her. He made it public that she was the author. And I think this is something I'd like to focus on, even if I don't get everything finished today, about this picaresque novel, the way in which, as a woman writer, she presents her work to a man's world. She starts the novel with a sort of preface or foreword before she actually begins the novel. In the Republic of Letters, there's no member of such inferior rank or who is so much disdained by his brethren of the quill as the humble novelist. Nor is his fate less hard in the world at large, since among the whole class of writers, perhaps not one can be named of which the votaries are more numerous but less respectable. His fate. It's a man's fate. She's sort of assuming that the novelist is a man. Of course, his was used in those days to mean his and hers, but she focuses very much on the his side. Let's see how it develops. She's saying that the popularity of the novel as a genre leads to it being disrespected, but the way she talks about his brethren of the quill defines novelists individually and as a group. Novelists are men. And in the following paragraph, she expresses the world of novels and novelists through the works of men. Yet while the annals of those few of our predecessors to whom this species of writing is indebted for being saved from contempt and rescued from depravity, we can trace such names as Rousseau, the French writer, Johnson, Marivaux, another French writer, Fielding, Richardson, and Smollett, all men. No man need blush starting from the same post. So basically she's giving examples that are of novelists and putting herself inside that group because she wants to hide the fact that she's a woman. All right, she's giving all men. The reality is that she was strongly inspired by another woman writer, but she doesn't mention that woman writer. Her novel is quite strongly influenced by Eliza Haywood, The History of Miss Betsy. Miss Betsy Thoughtless. But she doesn't mention Haywood, she doesn't mention any female writers. She wants her work to be taken seriously, so she puts it in the context of male literature. That's a kind of interesting point in itself, that women would only succeed, or one of the ways for a woman to succeed was to pretend to be a man. But of course, the protagonist is female. I won't go through all the detail because we're a bit pushed for time today. So you can watch, you can check it on your prints, or you can go through the presentation online later on. So you've got basically a young woman who's of obscure birth. Her family is low class or not really known very well, but she's very beautiful. This is a typical kind of protagonist that you get in the 18th century novel. It's attractive to female readers who dream of marrying a high-class man so they can identify with the lower-class heroine. And it's attractive to male readers who regard these lower-class women as kind of prey. All right? The trick for writers like Burney and Jane Austen was to show a higher class man who, instead of just treating such a lower class woman as prey, actually behaves honorably and marries her. Okay, that was the dream for the woman, whereas the dream for the man was sleep with her and then run away and marry a rich woman. But we find this going on again and again in the romantic fiction of the period. It's the typical kind of thing that's happening in 18th century, and it goes on into the 19th century as well. Aphra is really challenging the society. She's going back to the religion of the society and challenging that. But Fanny Burney is typical of the 18th century. It's more of a satire of manners. She doesn't go into big social questions like religion. It's more of a satire on the manners of the society, which is quite typical, I think, of the 18th century style of writing. The 18th century in general tends to focus on social niceties it's not engaging with the big moral questions. That's something that you get in the 17th century, the big moral questions. And if you were in the class last term, we'll have covered some of that. And it comes back again to an extent in the 19th century, but the 18th century is largely about kind of manners and politeness and the morality of the society at a fairly superficial level. One of the main features that you get is the tension between the private sphere, because women were supposed to belong to the private sphere, and the public sphere, the open world, which was the world of men. So we're starting to get into feminist territory here. This creates a sort of paradox, because the shyer Evelina is, the more attention she attracts. When she goes out into the street as a shy, woman, who is she? Who is she? Everybody wants to know who she is. We get quite a lot of paragraphs like where she gets young men kind of, and they kind of, hey, come on! She's not with a man. Okay, she's on her own. Oh, well, she's not on her own. She's with other women, but they think she's kind of game. They think that they can prey on her. They think they can approach her. And in the event, another character turns up and says, "No, I'm a man. I have male rights." As soon as a man turns up, okay, these other men back off. The whole idea is that a woman can't just be herself or be by herself. She has to be owned. She has to be somebody's property, some male person's property. Okay, so that comes across very strongly in the novel. I won't go through all the text. There's quite a lot of text which I've quoted on the print, but we haven't got time for it today. So the basic thing is, to be private was supposed to be good for being a woman, but if she was private, she would attract attention, and that would push her out into the public sphere. So on this occasion, she's rescued by a man, and it has to be a man. Okay, again, I won't go into the details of it. So the basic assumption that we get in the novel, both by the young men who are approaching Evelina, and by Sir Clement, who rescues Evelina, and by Evelina herself, is that a woman cannot simply be. She has to belong. She has to belong to a man. And Sir Clement is asserting his ownership rights over her. That's the kind of thing that the epistolary novel will cover. And it's very much that kind of world of social nicety. Okay, so I'm sorry we had to rush this so much, but as you can see, I had a few difficulties today with the presentation.